So Melanie, I got your email, but no,
We're live. It's okay. Good evening. Welcome to the April 4th, 2022 meeting of the Finance Committee. Tonight we are here to review fiscal year 2023 budget tracking at the department level and make any recommendations for changes in the budget. We will then communicate those back to the finance team in town if there are any changes, and then we will meet again on Wednesday so that we can actually go through and vote department by department to have that all ready for the town meeting warrant, which is due by next Monday, the 11th. So, all right. So I'll open it up. I handed Kevin. I need to get Kevin one of these.
thank you, sir.
All right, so what I handed out to you is a high-level budget tracking by department. You've each looked at the PDF, you each got the PDF document that I sent out last Thursday, one of those days. But this just compares level service to real needs budget by each department. You can see the differences in the real needs are mostly tied to personnel, as we've talked about and as we've met with each of the departments. So conservation had a change with hiring the full-time conservation agent. We went through that. We talked with police and fire about their needs for adding personnel. We talked with the director of the DPW about his concerns with facilities management and the impending retirement in the fleet maintenance division and getting someone up and trained on that. Veteran services had a very small increase, and then the last two were internal discussions that we had as a committee. We talked about that we haven't increased funding for the public library in any time that any of us could remember. So there was a nominal increase there. And then we had, I think it was our last meeting, or the one before that, the Recreation Council come into us and talk about their requests. So we added that in. The other changes that we had, tied to the fire positions in particular, Chief Herron had agreed to finance 50% of that increase through the ambulance fund, which we talked about, so that's been updated. And then there was, where is it at on here? There was a surplus, right, Melanie? We talked with Paula.
Yeah, I just noticed that didn't save whenever I did it. So the overlay is right now listed as -500, but that's gonna be -600, but we're gonna release 100,000 from overlay.
Because there's a surplus?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
okay. So when that comes down, you can see that the surplus deficit on the level service is around 922,000, on the real needs 1.3 million, we'll call it. As we talked about in previous meetings, we have free cash, and some of that free cash was allocated in the last special town meeting to
Some of it went to, some of it was moved into the OPEB.
OPEB, that's right, yes.
Fund, and then some of it was moved into the general stabilization, and then, I don't have the dollar amounts right here, but some was used to fund different articles that were on the special town meeting. I think there was maybe some police and fire items.
Yeah.
That it was used for. So
Okay.
we have, I wanna say it was 1.4, a little over 1.4 that hasn't been appropriated. So 1.3 was put in here just to leave like a little safety net in case there's other articles that needed to be funded, but that brings us down to a deficit still on the real needs of about the 16,000, but that could be, there is the free cash to fund that.
Right.
We were just being conservative and put the 1.3 in.
And so just so we're all up to speed on this again, just a reminder, we talked about in the last meeting, and then we can open it up for discussion. that historically, looking back over the past I think 3, maybe 4 years, our free cash amount has been pretty high. And so when we have the general consensus or thought was, when we have departments that have these needs, you know, we've had increases in, in IT, but historically as a town, we underfunded IT. We didn't have an IT director. We didn't have everything in place that we needed. So budgets go up. And do we need to have $1.3, $1.5, $1.8 million in free cash at the end of every fiscal year when we have departments that have real needs that they're coming to us appealing for? We've had conversations, Melanie and I have met with Charlie, the town administrator, several times, and that obviously funding from free cash is not something you want to do every year. You can't depend on it every year, but we feel like we've proven historically that it's been there. And working with the assessor and looking at projected tax revenue increases with the development that's happening in town, Charlie felt comfortable, again, moving forward with this as long as we had a tapered process in place so that this level of spending cannot continue at this increased level. And they would have to taper off over time so that the revenues would then meet where we were at and we'd get back to a balanced approach. So with that, what we originally came in tonight to do is to look through line item, we're not gonna go line item by line item, but each liaison looked at his or her budgets that they were liaison for, and we can talk through any recommendations on what we thought as a committee. That's what we're here for. And then have discussion around the proposed document that's in front of us, so that we can then hopefully come to some type of resolution Wednesday.
So you're talking about a tapered approach. What is that tapered approach?
I wish Charlie was here tonight because it's
And
not.
how do you, if you say, okay, let's increase the fire department and the police department by X number of people, how do you then avoid next year having to say, okay, sorry, we have to cut those people? I mean, where does that money come from? I mean,
Well-
are we,
So historically, we've had
we're just saying that we've historically had enough in the sense of,
in free cash.
In free cash, yeah.
And we've also, 2 years in a row now, put away during a pandemic, we put into a general stabilization fund that we feel that, we put it in there to pull from it if we need to. So if we need to use that to offset going forward.
okay,
But with the projections from the assessor's office, we feel that this is,
yeah, one would think if you've gotten through what we've gotten through.
Wouldn't this be a two-prong approach? We sat at our last meeting and we said we had over $4 million worth of free cash, right? Of which 1.2 million came from the land sale, right?
correct.
So it leaves about $3 million. And the question we had, or at least I had in my mind, was, if we got $3 million worth of free cash, where did it come from? Okay, so right now, what we're doing today is saying we can take so much of this 1.3, this 3 million, and put it towards the budget, because it's not really free cash, because what about tapering off the other end where the free cash came from? I mean, that tells me we have operating budgets, or wherever these sources are, that we're overfunding in areas. Why are we gonna continue to overfund there and count on any free cash to fund the budget?
It's kind of budgets shouldn't be overfunded if possible, right? We can all agree on that. If budgets are overfunded and they're not spent, as long as spending is monitored at a department level, unspent funds go back into free cash. So it's become like and I don't know if we have,
I know, it's a revolving cycle.
Right.
It's a crazy, crazy cycle.
And that's not the only, like, sometimes revenue, the local receipts come in higher than projected, and that's.
True.
Right, so on that, are we underestimating? I know we've always been conservative on receipts for revenues.
Right.
So we being conservative or too conservative in those areas? I mean, we need to look at where is this free cash coming from and potentially fix the process a little bit.
think, and it's been such a long history of it, that the town takes the conservative approach. I mean, we fund the finance committee reserve generally well over what's needed during the year. But with the idea that if you give that money up, you're not, like, if that, you know, say we do 100,000 one year and we're like, oh, we needed a lot more than that, the next year it's gonna be harder to raise. I think has always been what I've heard is the logic for some of these line items.
Well, you know, I don't know, I've been around for a while, I've seen a lot in these budget processes. And, you know, I have oftentimes professed, we go and we vote, and they do budgets based off of what was allocated at last year's town meeting. We don't do it off of what was spent.
Well, so tonight, one of the things that what we were all supposed to come with tonight, hopefully, was to look at the fiscal year expenditure versus the department request and point out anything that may be
Right. 'Cause
really
at this
far
point,
off.
We might be a little too far into the process to really make a big change on that this year, unless we can
I agree, but it's,
Right.
point.
I wouldn't expect it this year, we've been
Right.
talking about it for 15 years.
Well, I
Right.
think, and that's part of like the tapered approach that he mentioned. If we're not gonna use the way Charlie was saying it was, okay, this year we'll use 1.3, next year we'll use no more than 1.1, the next year no more than 900, you know, and keep going down until you're using none. So to get that to happen, you'd have to do what you said.
We'd have to take a look
Right.
at the budget and see where it wasn't spent.
Right.
You're a combination of, to your point, revenue receipts, and how are we estimating those, and/or line items within the budget that need to be trued up.
Yeah, because I
But
can't.
then at the end of the day, Dave, I mean, isn't the net result that, okay, you know, we get to a point where you haven't spent X number of dollars during the fiscal year, that money, you know, is free cash, and isn't that generally then turned into your stabilization?
It doesn't necessarily go to
Not
stabilization.
not all, but I mean, at least a hunk?
Well, the town's attitude for many years has been, don't put free cash towards the budget.
Right.
So now we are gonna put free cash towards the budget, which I think is the right thing to do, by the way. But on the other side, we have to taper
We do.
the other side. That we've gotta say, okay, we're constantly getting $200,000 back from this area. They're overfunded. Move it. Now that 1.3 becomes 1.1. Years and years ago, we used to get 1 million, 1.5 million in free cash. To get 3 million tells me there's something a little bit off.
I agree.
So it's time to really kind of tune it up a little
Another
bit.
large chunk from the healthcare group that they had left.
Yeah, that happened.
That was
Yeah, this
another,
Wasn't this in COVID money too? They bought a bunch of computers and everything
That
that
doesn't
would normally
go.
come out of the regular budget?
no, those wouldn't go into, a lot of what was spent with the COVID fund wasn't budgeted, right? The IT stuff wasn't budgeted, and it wasn't spent out of the general fund, so it wouldn't really factor into.
Right, but if we didn't have that money, you wouldn't, and you needed to get new computers, you have to put in the
Yeah,
budget, right?
I can give you a little history on that. So typically, the way we had done it in the past, nobody has explained to me, was kind of, when you do system rollouts here, it was more of a piecemeal process where you do a few at a time, few at a time, few at a time. So eventually you get, you know, over a period of time, you get a full system replacement. Due to the COVID money, with the previous town administrator, we opted to replace everything at once for the majority of the departments that could potentially have to work remotely. So that's why typically in my budget, you'll see like a line item for like $20,000 for like system replacement, things like that. But when our total COVID cost was like $70,000 for everything.
Right.
I think what you're saying
So-
is definitely on point, and that I think that there'd be no choice but to really focus in on that next year if we're gonna really
Right.
stick to a tapered approach of funding.
Well, and to managing the process through a reduced budget is much more predictable than relying on free cash. 1,000%, that is where we need to get to. I think with the changes in town administrator, town accountant, town treasurer collector, our board, I would suggest if we can because we've proven that we've had an abundance in the free cash for so many years, if we can do that this year and get these departments the personnel services that they need, which I think they all proved through their presentations with us, especially with the anticipated expansion or growth that could happen, hopefully if we're able to connect into that sewer line, but yeah.
Oh, I agree, and I think, going into next year, if we start early enough to be looking at actual expenses versus what was voted on at town meeting, would really help us prep for next year's budget. We're just fortunate enough this year to have the amount of free cash we have in order to do this. I'm gonna call it a transition year, because we will have to look at the process more next year.
And I think what you said from the beginning to look at line items, but we can do that on our end too, between Charlie and I, when we send out the memos to departments, we can start stressing that earlier, to try to get the information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the great things, that did happen this year, great strategic decision to put the money towards OPEB, the 1.4 million, that was a good reduction for us. And that we're not relying on the money that came in from the, I guess the money from the land sale went towards those special articles, but from the previous one, but, okay. With that said, I'm trying to think the easiest way to go through I guess I don't want to go page by page, because it's 120 some pages, but why don't we just we'll start with Kevin, we'll just go around the horn. If there were line items that you had questioned, or we want to try to get more information about, or have a recommendation on.
Well, you had mentioned earlier, the fire department, and the increase there is tied to, as you said, personnel, of which, the chief is willing to kick in toward that increase. Police is the same thing, I think sorely needed. And then the library comes in with a modest increase, part of which, relates to maintaining a necessary figure to keep state aid as it is. So I can't in good conscience say that there's anything in there that I would look to remove from those three budgets.
Okay. That is fair.
Can I
Okay.
ask a quick question?
Yep.
I'm sorry, this is kind of taken out of, so I know that there's a change over the library with the library director leaving. Does that affect anything within their budget?
Right now, I believe the board voted a stipend to the assistant director, in place of no acting director, which I think will probably take some of that.
Okay.
Yeah, probably not all of it, but yeah, it could play in a little, but I think they budgeted.
I have library here, hold on.
What they budgeted was about what they advertised the position at.
Yeah, it's advertised for what he was making. So, whether that's, we're not the library board, but whether we've had turnover in that position, I don't know if it's tied to salary and something they need to look at, but I don't know. I'm not an expert in librarian salaries. But I'd have the same question, and I don't know, Melanie, you would know, was the treasurer-collector contract signed?
It was now, so we updated, this budget's updated.
It is.
For what the
Okay.
contract is signed at.
All right, good.
Yeah. A lot of these, and I don't know if you had mentioned this to everyone, is a lot of the departments put in their budgets, assuming a 2% increase, for clerical, it's just generally 2%. We went back and updated for anyone who's in a contract that's not signed at this point, so clerical doesn't have a signed contract at this point. We kept them at the same salary as FY '22, knowing that they will get an increase likely at some point, and that maybe in the fall, we'll have to, vote at a town meeting for the difference. But Charlie wasn't comfortable putting in budgeted amounts for contracts that aren't there.
The other thing that I think should be noted, on the police budget, I believe, if I remember this correctly, is that the cruiser replacement was transferred per the capital committee's request from capital to the operating budget. So that is part of the increase as well.
Yeah, maybe what, 120.
And that's a big chunk of the increase.
It is, yeah, that's
It's like 100 grand, right?
118,000.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I can't recall what the Conservation Commission's increase was. Was that the position?
Position, I think.
That was the adding of the conservation
Agent.
agent and tapering back the administrative assistant,
Right.
the difference. And then also offset with
I think adding a.
John Delano's not
Not being.
with the consulting services.
The engineer.
Yeah. Lucia, did you have anything in the departments that you were responsible for?
Well, I think the Board of Assessors is fine. There's nothing significant going on there. Town clerk's budget, I think we could maybe just, the stipend decrease by $1,000. It's not a whole lot, but I don't know, just my thought.
Have that here.
And it's high, we don't know, it's unknown as far as elections go, what the laws are gonna be. They're not etched in stone yet, so that's high, so you might be seeing some of that going back after the
Is there
state
three
elections.
next year?
3 this year.
Yeah, or this year, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, so we have that, so town clerk. Okay.
And the 25,000 that's listed for recreation, is that intended as a position, or is it intended as program?
It's not, I don't know, no, it's not a position.
Okay.
That's just, we had said we wanted to give them
Right,
funding
yeah,
for the
yeah.
activities. Yeah, so we can have that
Perfect.
clarified.
Oh, for I thought recreation was the position.
Well, so they came to us asking about a position.
Oh, okay.
To which we said to them, we wanted to see a a plan
Okay.
put in place. But we also recognize the fact that they want to do the summer festival and the Christmas parade and
Okay.
those types of things that we said, you should have something, to use for that.
And that is in addition, I believe they have $5,000 elsewhere in the budget that they've always had that basically pays for the detail on I think that's under recreation for the Christmas parade. But I'll double check when you guys keep going.
So we had said, if I remember, we wanted to give them 25,000 in total.
Okay, so maybe
So that would reduce by 5,000 then.
I'll double check on that, but I'll keep a note on it. It's only 1,000 actually, so
Oh, okay,
it
so
won't change by 1,000.
small dollars.
And I would just say that the building department's is flat. There's nothing there. Our bigger one is the DPW with the challenges that they face, but we know that fleet maintenance and facilities, the cost of this stuff has gone through the roof. So, I mean, a gallon of paint's now $85 instead of $40. So, I can't really object to these. I know that what the money they save us on fleet maintenance from sending it out far outweighs this increase. So we're very fortunate to have that, but keep in mind, as we go through our tapered approach next year, if we've got mechanics who are gonna retire and some of the challenges he has, we're gonna be struggling in that area.
Well, this was to pre-hire for the retirement, right?
Yeah, and also, it did, there was one, no, there wasn't, I thought
No,
one
not to
position-
pre-hire for it. This was cost increase. This is under fleet maintenance.
But I thought that was under
He
salary.
was giving us the heads up that he'd be looking at that next year.
That's some materials like oil and paint and all that.
Yeah,
Oh, I misunderstood that.
and the cost of the tires, et cetera, all that stuff.
I thought, but fleet maintenance, I thought he had, each sector had its own people, if you will. And I thought that, you know, within the department, you know, like, you know, water, sewer, fleet maintenance, so forth and so
Well,
on.
this- that's-
And that was
Fleet
coordinated.
maintenance is the mechanics that he has, the two mechanics. And then that's fleet maintenance,
In other words, I think there's a people component to fleet maintenance, isn't it, right?
So he was
There
complaining
is.
because he was afraid he's gonna lose the guys and he couldn't replace them.
right.
So he's not replacing them because there's no way to get the replacement.
Yeah, this guy was a person.
How do we do with the snow and ice? Will we close the budget on that this year? Do we know?
We're gonna be, I don't think, as of right now, we're about break even, so.
Break even,
Yeah.
good. So that's good budget.
Yeah, so that's getting, so that's one less thing that we would need to fund from free cash at town meeting. But I have the DPW's budget here, and I have, it says additional mechanic for their real needs, the difference of $60,000.
That's what I thought. I thought it was an added mechanic.
According to this.
Thought he wasn't adding that till next year.
Well, so, I mean, that was one of the discussions, I guess, that, I mean, we do have a few different, we have a lot of personnel that's being increased. We've agreed on the fire because they're paying for half of it, and the fire chief did a great job in reducing other line items within the budget to really, I mean, to add the staff that he wants to add for a net increase of $73,000 is
Mhm.
very reasonable. We have two requests for personnel from DPW, which is the fleet maintenance, which is to pre-hire a mechanic in anticipation of the retirement, so that should offset itself when that retirement happens. And then facilities management, that was to add somebody to assist Brian in the management of the facilities in town. I guess we could talk through that position request. Anyone had any thoughts on that?
So I thought that the pre-addition for the DPW position was a year away. That he was increasing his budget for more of the components, the parts, and stuff like that. So, I mean, he may not find a mechanic this year anyway.
He may not, you're right, it
So-
could go unspent. I would think to find somebody of that capability.
Mm-hmm.
So are we in favor as a committee of both positions at the DPW for facilities and fleet? Or I should say, does anyone have any concerns?
I'm in favor because the search to get somebody could take 6 or 8 months anyway, to find somebody. And as far as facilities maintenance go, to have another body to do some work far outweighs trying to contract for services.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been in that field myself, so I really couldn't have any objections. I just want to make sure that's exactly what's happening, that's all.
Okay. I believe it is, but we can get, that's why we're not voting on anything until
Right,
Wednesday,
right.
so we can get clarity on that. One line item, I had a question on Melanie, and you may not know, we may have to follow up with Charlie on this, was the amount that we budget for town council.
Right. I don't have right here where we are year to, oh, does that report tell you where we are year to date?
Yeah, well, it was run, this was as of 3/24, so about a week ago, a little more than that. Had us at just shy of 69,000.
And what do we, is it 175?
Yeah.
I
I just don't know
remember us
what-
questioning that last year and the prior years too, and I think it came back to unpredictability of legal matters, that we
Yeah.
didn't change it.
So this
because
is
of
one
that.
of those that you'd rather have it and then give it back
Everybody's
free
behaving
cash.
themselves.
Yeah.
But,
And I don't know what, I'm sure that there's, it probably varies greatly based on the number of contracts that are being negotiated.
Yeah.
CBAs and things like that, so, and I'm not sure that number next year, how many.
Right. Getting though, like to Dave's point, next year, maybe we look at a 5 or 10-year trend of where it fell for those years, and that could be a budget that gets cut down.
Right. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you need counsel, you need counsel, and you're gonna
Right.
spend it, so.
Right. And we don't have much say over
Right.
when we need it and when we
Right.
don't.
Okay. Well, you look at that, Dave. I'll skip to Joe, and then I'll come back to you. Any recommendations on the budgets that you were liaison for?
Yeah, the Conservation Commission, I work with those folks. I think having a full-time person is helpful, especially with the building that's going on in town and development, so that's good. And Council of Aging was steady as she goes, no
Yeah.
change there. And IT, I think there's all kinds of things happening with it, so give him what he needs to do his job.
I will agree. Did I skip you?
You did, but that's okay.
I'm sorry. No, sorry.
No,
Crystal.
that's okay. So my thought process on the Board of Health in particular is I know they wanted to add an additional nurse, but I think maybe for this year, because everything's, we have a couple new people over there, that maybe we'd see how this year goes. And then if they really find that their needs next year fit that, with some ideas on when the nurse would work and what they would do, and find out really, I guess, what the current nurse is doing, how often she's getting visitors and stuff like that. So that particular line item, they were asking for an increase of 17,000.
Okay.
I know mental health was talked about a lot, and maybe that's a conversation that can be had within the police, fire, and dispatch too, if there's something like that that they can create, or you know what I mean? Like, there might be more to it than just that, so.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked a lot with the schools too, you and I, about how they've really beefed up their staff on nursing. And I know it's to meet the needs of the students, but it would be ideal if the town and schools could partner on that. Mental health is mental health.
Yep.
And see how they could leverage the same resources maybe to help fill that small gap. That's a great suggestion.
Town accountant was pretty much within what,
Be careful.
pretty much, you know, what was written in the contract. She's doing a good job over there.
Bigger advocate.
Yeah. I bought a real new fancy one.
I think it's helpful having someone who was on, finance committee now being over there, so.
Melanie has been a lifesaver.
And schools, I think, looking, we're at where we're at with them, so.
Yeah, I mean, the school certified their budget. They do have an increase, however, as we talked about, because of the increase in the number of families qualified for free or reduced lunch, that increased their state aid by well over $1 million, and they've used that. So they also did renegotiate with the teachers that had an increase for the first time. So I think that equated to, I think it averages 3.75% in year one, and then it's 0.0 in years 2 and 3. So that's sustainable. I I think our teachers are an asset, obviously, to the community and the town, and they've been through a lot with COVID. They're doing a lot trying to keep our, keep the student population going, being reassimilated, you know, back in, and there's a lot of gaps that they're working hard to make up. So outside of those increases, the school's very manageable. They've done a great job, in my opinion, controlling their expenses. They've done a great job negotiating with the bus contracts and, you know, food service contracts and things of that nature. So I didn't have any recommendations with theirs as well.
So after further review, they are labor increases.
Dave feels comfortable now. So, but to your point, good point, that's probably, it's not gonna be expended on day one. So there's gonna be a little cushion in there.
I know Chief O'Brien mentioned that today too, that with being a civil service police department, it does take him a while to hire as well.
Which is true. Okay, so not many changes. The only changes we had here was reduce the town clerk stipend by $1,000, reducing the request for the nurse and the Board of Health by $17,000. We verified the add of staff. If we do both of those, that actually brings it to a 0, a little bit lower than 0. So we would erase that small deficit. So I think we should be in good shape.
Knock on something.
So, just, I do want to ask a question about the nurse and the whole mental health thing, et cetera, in town. Is it something that we should maybe consider doing? I mean, the mental health in town it's big. And
True.
the police department's very involved in a lot of these calls. The chief talked about it. They get tied up with these things. Is it worth, what we're doing here is giving people their real needs budgets. And what, you know, we've been hearing about the police and the fire for a long time, the schools for a long time and everything. And we're finally in a position to do something here. Should we try to have more of a conversation with the Board of Health about this nurse position and maybe connect with the chief and get their thoughts and to potentially keep it in here for them? Or at least, let's say that we're gonna have further conversations, so if we get to a special town meeting in the fall, that we're able to put this back in. Because even at the last meeting, we talked about opera funds for mental health, helping in town, et cetera. So I'm just, it's a bigger issue than I think we see on the outside. So do they really need this tool? So I would suggest we don't totally wipe it out, that we try to have some sort of a conversation with them between now and Wednesday.
Like, yeah, two things I have on that. Number one, what's the liability of the town? So if I go to get mental health services from the town, and then I go do something crazy, is there any liability for the town? Right? And then number two, one nurse for the whole town, not gonna be able to service the whole town.
But is,
Right? So there's not enough capacity. If everyone in town wants to use that service, like everyone can use the police department, but if there's one nurse, how many people are gonna be able to use it?
This was more so tied, I believe, to a lot of it's council on aging and some of the programs that they run there around like blood pressure monitoring and
Right.
helping with Medicare and Medicaid and all that kind of stuff. Some of it then,
it was discussed about the mental health
Then-
area, which is,
Which they're not really able to get to as much as they would like to.
right, so then it's almost like, do you need to have a conversation about creating, like, because you could use a nurse, but you can also use a social worker, you could use
Right.
like someone whose, you know, background is a licensed therapist, so it's, I think, you know, I think it's great to actually start that conversation, because if so many people are having problems and they need a resource, that's good, but, again, I think you need to have a conversation about, I guess, the areas, or, I mean, it's a bigger conversation.
Right. And can we affiliate it with like South Shore Mental Health? You know what I mean, where it's like a referral service?
well, we do
Instead of having
have
the
that.
town into that business of healthcare, that's a whole different business.
Because
I
that's
think.
the police department uses that
Yes.
pooled.
That's right, and
mental
whenever
health.
they're available, they can come, but there's
Right.
only one girl through, or one person that is shared, if I remember correctly.
So I guess maybe could we get some clarity between now and Wednesday on the real needs of it, and if it could be rolled?
Keep going.
Excuse me.
If it-
Now she's
This
famous.
is live, sir.
If it could be rolled in with either something that the police department's doing or currently doing. And then we can clarify that on Wednesday before we vote.
Yeah, just,
Good point, good discussion.
I'll reach out and I'll let you know what I find out.
Okay. And Melanie, just a question, are you aware of any, I haven't seen articles, are you aware of any articles that were seeking funding through free cash?
If there is, there might be one, I wanna say maybe around 20,000. So plenty of room with that, but I can look at what it was. We were waiting to see if anyone had retirements that they were gonna be putting on there, 'cause I think we started doing that a few years ago. If someone was retiring and there was gonna be a large buyout. I don't think we have any. Let me try to find the most recent copy. And you guys need to vote on those too, right?
Yeah, we would need
On the
to.
articles,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let me see what I can find. Oh, yeah, because there was one for the bullet,
The bulletproof
vest.
vests,
right,
was that in capital or no?
no.
No, okay.
No, it falls right under the capital limit, I think.
so speaking of capital, tomorrow night the capital committee's meeting and we're given a number for capital. Is that coming out of free cash and we're not gonna bond stuff, or is this to bond? Because I know for the last 2 years, or at least 1 year, we tried not to go
I
out to.
know one number that was given to, given to Michelle from Charlie was around what was put into the stabilization at the fall town meeting. And then we reviewed some old articles that haven't been fully spent, and we were able to free up some money there too. So I don't know what the plan is. I don't know what the plan is from there. I know Michelle has those numbers, and you guys are gonna talk about what you wanna fund. So,
So that funding source would be no bonding at that point, right?
not at this point, but I think like the DPW, like the well,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that, I don't think the money's there to pay that out, right?
In the enterprise fund, right?
Right. So you have, but we have money coming off the bond in August?
Yeah, that's what I sent, what was it I sent you, wasn't a ton, a million maybe?
Yeah, 923 or something
Yeah.
like that. So we're not gonna be counting on using that next year?
Not that I'm aware of at this point, but I'm not sure.
There's just a lot more capital needs than money available. Surprise.
There's a
Right,
lot of capital
right.
needs this year, I saw the list, yes.
Roads.
I mean, the roads we've always done, we match it with chapter 90, but
Yeah, it was about 400,000 or something like
Yeah.
that, and then there were a
But-
couple big things.
there's a couple, the generator here at Town Hall is a
Generator, the
very big item.
School track,
So I'm just wondering if that, the 900 or a million that is coming off, to roll it over to bonding, what can we bond with that? What's the dollar value, and should we be looking at using it next year? Because if we vote at town meeting, a lot of these programs aren't gonna kick off until
right,
September or so.
right. I can talk to Marilyn too tomorrow.
What's the town hall signage? They want to replace?
You want that?
No, do you know what it is?
Oh, yeah, it's a marquee to put out here like they have at the high school.
And then we'll have marquee at
And they want
The
one at the
central
middle
and the
school
middle.
and the central school. I would think maybe the town hall one could cover
A couple
two
things.
things at least.
Probably.
I will say it would be nice, like, for the town hall one, like, when meetings are coming up or something. I mean, I don't mind the DPW putting out that big orange sign, but it would be nice to have something a little.
Yeah, it's nice when you drive by other towns that have
But
it.
yeah, that's a lot of,
It's nice.
a lot of
Um,
marquees.
$50,000.
Well, I mean, by Wednesday, we're gonna have, well, I guess we need to have, right, a firm sense of, you know, what the articles are and how much, you know, so that we can go through as we did have in the past, article by article, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got it open right now.
There's not a ton of articles, right?
So for the special, there might be snow and ice. Once the warrant posts tomorrow, I'll have the warrant posts Wednesday. I don't know what day of the week it is. I'll have a number for that,
For a small deficit.
if there is.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if there's
Right.
gonna be.
Yep.
Also in the special, some money going from the ambulance fund to general fund for ambulance supplies. The town reports, were you guys gonna approve that reserve fund transfer for the printing of town reports? Is that?
Yeah, that wasn't actually, I should go grab Rebecca because I thought that would have been in our box tonight and it wasn't. I'm glad you said that.
I think that maybe there was a question of whether you guys were gonna approve it, and if not, if you weren't gonna approve it, then it could go on the town meeting. I think you were just questioning it to do your due diligence, but,
Yeah, that was for the bucket, right?
it was for the
Printing.
printing, it was like $1,000.
Oh, the printing. Oh, yeah, no. There was another one though that John had for the, he had
Oh, for the lift.
The lift, that's what it was.
Did we,
You guys did that.
we
one.
did that?
Was that the one we did? Okay.
There was another one.
All right, so it was the second one for the town printing, yeah. No, we can, I mean, I don't think is anyone here opposed?
Move the approval of $1,000 transferred from the reserve fund for printing of the town report.
We have a motion by Kevin.
Second.
Second by Dave. All in favor?
Aye.
We'll just need to get the paperwork from Rebecca to actually, I think we have to
Sign it.
sign all that stuff.
I'm still scrolling through the town meeting, I haven't got to anything else with money yet.
That's good.
Yeah, the bulletproof vest, that's $15,215, so that will likely come from free cash.
I think that might be it.
That might be the only
There she
one.
is.
I took one just in case.
Speak of the devil.
Oh, you have one?
But,
You're
yeah.
watching us on,
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, so Charlie hasn't signed it, because he had said that you guys weren't sure if you got to do it or not.
Oh, yeah, no, there was just a question
Okay.
on it,
Yeah,
but
so-
that's fine, so we can,
So that should be all set. Okay.
okay, perfect. We'll pass that around. We'll sign that.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. That was, maybe
That
we
was-
were that loud.
It's
Sure.
good.
Okay, so we will pass this around if everyone can sign it before they leave tonight.
6 o'clock on Wednesday?
So next meeting is 6 o'clock on Wednesday. We'll have everything ready. We'll vote on everything, try and make it quick and efficient. Any other topics for discussion? Motion to adjourn.
A second? Oh, you're making one?
Moved, second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Just don't leave until you sign, please.
Sure.